Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the JupyterLab weekly call. It is September 28th, 2022, and I did have to look that up before the call because I was not confident. But today we have 15 participants on the call at the moment. Hooray, that's awesome. And agenda, I'm going to link that again real quick. Please sign in, add anything there. I see we already have a few items. If you think that your share is going to be about or longer than 5 minutes, please add it to the further discussion section so we can get to it at the end and still make sure we make time for everyone earlier. Also, because I'm a nerd, I'm going to remind you that this is a Jupyter community event. So we do have a Jupyter code of conduct at jupyter.org/conduct that applies to any of these events at all times. It includes me as well. And yeah, with that, I think we're going to get started. Oh, actually, before we get started, the one last thing I want to do is say I'm hosting the call today because we're trying to rotate hosts. You can find more about that on that issue. Please feel free to sign up if you want to co-host or anything. I'm just going to bump that again. Now we're actually going to get started. And on the agenda, I see Frederick, you're first. Ready to go?
Sure. So hello, everybody. Sorry, lots of bullet points. First one is an announcement for the JupyterLab Council members. You should have received 1 or maybe 2 emails, depending on your spam policy. Sorry for that. For voting for the JupyterLab Software Steering Committee representative. I'm sorry, I did that a bit late, so I moved the closing day for the election for October 4th. I know that initially we tried to target October 3rd, but to let at least a week for people to vote. So I decided to close the vote on the 4th. So next week we should be able to announce who is the representative for JupyterLab. So that was the announcement. As it has been discussed a couple of times now and in all Jupyter projects, GitHub 2-factor authentication are going to be enforced on JupyterLab GitHub organization. I propose to enforce it right after this meeting, except if somebody has a very good reason for me to delay that. But I think no, we have let everybody the time for doing action about that. And I think everybody that's still active has activated that feature, so should be fine. So that was for the second bullet point. The third one is actually just a question. So there's been an issue on the extension cookie cutters that we discussed, like I think it was a month ago now, about changing the license for the cookie cutters. The idea would be to switch it to CC0. I think it was Alex the last time that was asking about that. And the question I have is like, could we move forward, or do we need to like get an answer for every authors that have contributed to that for changing the license, or can we just move forward, presuming that people that haven't looked at that issue or having say that they are not in agreement with the change of license are in agreement with it, like so that's the question, and then I come back to the next point.
I don't understand the implication of this license versus BSD. But I think what this is it's more permissive and allows you to basically pick any license you like. Is that the reasoning behind it?
Yeah.
During our previous discussion, it's the equivalent of anybody can use it under any license they want without any questions. It's almost like it's unlicensed, or it's the equivalent of like what's the term when music is free for everybody to use? Public domain.
Okay, I see.
It's a very intentional saying, yes, anybody can use this. And by putting it that way, rather than just not putting a license on it, it removes the ambiguity of whether or not it's licensed. That was my understanding of what this particular license means.
I see.
Yeah, and the idea was also then to clarify the fact that you are fully free to change the license that's the default output of the cookie cutter, if you want, and not start to explain, okay, you are free to change it because the license files is generated with you as the author of the extension that came out of the template. So it's just to simplify everything, I'd say.
That sounds reasonable to me. Are you asking on this call for objections? Like, is this the plan to do it? What is the ask here?
Yeah, is it like, can I move forward and open a PR changing the license on the root of the repository to clarify that and then propose closing the issue? I mean, that will still let some window for people with the PR open to come and bring objection if there are some at last minutes, but like I just want to ask here before opening the PR, because if already somebody sees trouble, then I won't open a PR if it doesn't make sense.
My only question is, do we know if there's any rules or precedent about whether or not the current contributors need to approve a license change from BSD to CC0? Because I know certain licenses you can they're written in a way that you can hop between them without like a unanimous approval, because they're compatible, I guess is usually the term. But is that true of going from BSD3 to CC0, or do we need to get the sign off on every single code contributor? It's not a long or a short list, if I remember correctly, but I know from previous experience, getting somebody who's maybe only contributed one line to a project that they've never gone back to might be like pretty difficult.
So we're not changing the license to the cookie cutter project. We're changing the license that the cookie cutter project template generates, right?
No, we're changing the license of the project so that people are aware that when it generates code, that code can be licensed any way they want. I believe the plan was still to just generate a BSD license as an example, like as a starting point, but the repo itself would be CC0. That was my understanding of our previous discussion.
Yeah, I fully agree with what Alex has said.
Yes. Okay.
And Jason commented just for on the note, he thinks it makes sense to open a PR and to get contributors to approve on that PR. And I think, I don't know of any other cases, but it's true that CC0 is much more permissive because, for instance, you are losing any sense of copyright. So that definitely, it would be better to ask for approval. But then I agree with Alex, we may end up with the question was, okay, what do we do in 2 months' time if there are still some contributors that haven't approved it? But maybe we can see what's happening on the PR and come back with the question if it raised.
I want to ask a naive question, but I'm worried derailing. Is it common to use Creative Commons licenses with code? I feel like it's not, even though I think it falls under them. Did I miss the reason that we decided to go with that? Because there are other permissive licenses I feel like I see around more. Or did I just miss a step trying to read through stuff?
The idea here is to say that if it's a template of something, the best would be to say it's CC0. Because it's not actual code.
You can do anything with it,
yeah,
right?
And it's not actual code that you are executing. It's just like the text of it.
And if, from my experience and knowledge, CC0 is the only license that is written to be this like blanket permissible, like public domain-esque license. Even super other permissible ones still have an actual license, like a proper license attached that sticks with it.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, like Steve said in the comments, I don't believe it is usually for code, because most people who write code want their name on it, even if it is free to share.
Okay, just checking. Thank you.
To address a point that Darian brought up, because large portions of the actual project are incorporated in the generated code, I think that's why it's important to license the project, the cookie cutter as a whole, because it's incorporated in the generated output. William Stein in the chat is mentioning WTFPL, which I think some people have adopted. My guess is the CC0 license has significant and more legal vetting than WTFPL.
Okay.
I'm
so
not
may-
hearing any objections. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was saying like I can probably move on to the next point. Thanks. So I will open the PR and ping the contributors for asking for an approval. And then the next point I have is about releasing 3.5.0. We have had some discussion with people at AWS. So I'm a bit behind for doing the announcement features and notification features. And because at AWS is really interested to be able to test JupyterLab with Jupyter Server v2. And that's already that. The idea is to release 3.5 without the notification and announcement features so that we can release it like starting almost today if you want. And delay the features about notification and announcement for another time. So the question is it okay for everybody, or does somebody would prefer to delay 3.5 for including notification and announcement, for instance?
I have no stake in it personally, but I'm fine with not delaying.
Okay, then I will start the 3.5 branches and move forward, dropping notification and announcement features. And the last point is just a small reminder, there is the JupyterLab performance meeting. Sorry, I didn't write it fully. Just after this call, so feel free to join if you are interested. And that was all for me. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you for all those updates. Yeah, thank you. That was you're working on a lot of different things at once. That's cool to see. Great. Can we move on to Darian? Maybe.
Cool.
Okay.
So let's see. As Isabella mentioned at the top, please sign up to host this call if you feel like it. There's a Team Compass pinned issue. And if you cannot modify the top level comment to put your name in, just write a comment and we'll do it for you. And if you have any questions, I am happy to help. Any of the previous hosts are probably going to be really nice as well and help. Yeah, please do it. And the other thing is I linked a Lumino PR that has been open for a couple of weeks now, and it has to do with processing message loop propagation of messages to the widget tree in a background tab. So when you first load JupyterLab, the application class instantiates a shell, which is a Lumino widget, and the events propagate downward from that shell to all of the children nodes. It's a bit like, if you're familiar with React, the React root level component and all of its children. But with Lumino, the messaging that happens is really lightweight and automatic. So you're not passing things like props. It's just your widget, by virtue of being a widget, is a message handler, and it receives things like, oh, there was a resize, so you can resize or re-render your stuff, or there was a focus, or there was an update request, etc. And this was not happening when you were loading JupyterLab in a background. So suppose you type in the URL for a hosted JupyterLab instance, you hit go, and then you switch tabs to read something because you know your environment's slow or something. It turns out that the UI rendering wasn't happening because the message loop was predicated on, at base level, using the request animation frame function in the browser, and in the non-browser context, it was using the set immediate function. What this PR does is two things. One is that it allows the poll class, which also is something that occurs at a regular interval, to know when your document is hidden, and any poll subclasses can access this.hidden and have behavior that might be different than the superclass. And it adds a concept of lingering. So a poll will tick one additional time in the background, even if its even if its strategy is to not tick when hidden, just in case one time it'll do it. You can change linger to 0, you can change linger to 19, it doesn't matter, but by default, it'll linger one more time. And it also changes the way the message loop defers propagation of messages to not use request animation frame or set timeout. It instead relies on the async nature of promises. So it caches a single resolved promise, and then every single function call happens in the .then of that cached promise. And it allows you to cancel because the function that runs lets you intervene by flipping a flag. So when you schedule, you get back a function that if you execute it, it'll actually unschedule your thing. And this is not a public API change. This is internal to message loop. All the tests pass. In fact, the tests are a bit more aggressive now to make sure nothing got changed. And the performance profile seems pretty much identical to the request animation frame. In some contexts, it seemed like it was faster. Sometimes it seemed marginally slower. I tried it in Firefox and Chrome. I didn't try it in Safari, but I think I would be surprised if there's any difference in behavior there. And hopefully what this means is nobody notices anything except for people who were loading stuff in the background. They should notice it loading faster. And that's it for me, unless somebody has questions. Cool, thanks.
You're requesting more review with this, right? Or one more review?
Well, I specifically asked Vidar to review it because Vidar made some insightful comments that led me down a rabbit hole to re-implement the whole thing. But I'm not asking anyone to review unless they feel like it.
Awesome, thank you. I'll be quiet for a few seconds for any surprise comments. Okay, keep your secrets, everyone. Good work. Jeremy, you're next on the agenda if you're ready.
Yeah, just a quick announcement that there's a new 4.0 pre-release out today, and there are a couple of changes, so please test. There's the new extension manager using PyPI as the backend, and also a bunch of performance improvements, and this whole RTC refactor. So all of this is in, and you can try it on Binder if you want. And that's it.
I mean, that's it. Sounds like a wonderful, that's it. But thank you so much for the updates. Thoughts on that? More silence? Awesome. Good meditative time. I am checking the, we don't have anything else on the agenda, but we do have time if anybody wants to throw something in. We also don't have anything on the additional discussion yet. Yeah, let me get you that link. But I would like to throw in, we've had a little bit more discussion in the chat about licenses. If it's okay, I'm going to read some comments so they're captured in the recording because I think this is a good discussion. Okay, what am I seeing here? So we have, there are several public domain equivalent licenses. We have a Wikipedia link that lists those. A very good argument, or that's what Jason Grout sent the list of things. William Stein said a very good argument for CCO over WTFPL is that the WTFPL is explicitly banned for use at Google. Jason found that CCO over the unlicensed is encouraged. So we're seeing kind of some discussions. It's continuing. Does anyone want to speak more on those, or is it good just happening in the chat?
The one of the interesting things that I saw from the Fedora project was it says it's also noteworthy that some MIT variant licenses, MIT contains explicitly the right to sublicense. Some MIT variant licenses which contain the right to sublicense are closer to a true public domain declaration than the one in the unlicensed text. And in fact, in particular, the MIT 0 license removes the attribution requirement. So it becomes effectively a public domain license. According to the Wikipedia article. So that's another possibility. But I think MIT license does not have a patent clause in it. So it's got the same problem as CC0 as far as Fedora says.
Okay, yeah, that's actually what I was wondering, why CC0 over MIT in that case, but that makes sense. Thanks for hunting this down. Any further licensing insight?
This is licensing for what? Sorry, I missed that part.
Oh, for cookie cutter, the extension cookie cutter, I can link again from the upper in the agenda. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah, diving into that, very fun. Okay. Any other, okay, we have more on the agenda, but go on, yes.
An issue you opened, Sylvan.
That was in another life.
Yeah, I hate when people
2017,
like,
come on, 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's
our performance meeting in like an hour. I saw that on my calendar.
There is.
There is in 30 minutes, yeah. That's
okay. Or actually it says at 10 a.m. in the calendar. Okay, so in 30 minutes.
Yeah, depending on your time zone.
Yeah.
But
I'm seeing one more thing on the agenda, actually. We can back up empty notebooks, Savon.
Yes, I wanted to bring this up. The notebook format does not require for a notebook to have at least one cell. It's totally fine to have an empty notebook. Although the current implementations in the front end always add an empty cell whenever you find yourself with an empty notebook. This actually is problematic, especially in the case of real-time collaboration. So there are several corner cases where you could find yourself with, let's say, a notebook with 2 cells, and 2 different users delete a different cell, and the auto merge would result in an empty notebook, and everyone would start adding cells, and as many peers as you may have. And so you find yourself with many cells that are empty because not everyone adds the same cell, they create a new one. And moreover, this constraint of having at least one cell, whenever like a cell is deleted, is so the logic seems to be spread across the code base in so it's a bit untidy. And so what we would like to do is to allow for empty notebooks in the UI. So new notebooks would still have a new empty cell when you create them, although deleting that cell would be totally okay. In terms of UX, we are thinking of two things. First, we should say something in the notebook widget about, rather than showing a blank page, so that the person doesn't think that the notebook widget is broken. There is actually something, it's just empty. And it is also loosely related to some discussions that we've had in the past to add buttons at the bottom of a notebook to add new cells, just like in VS Code. So in the case where should we add such buttons, in the case of an empty notebook, you would still have a markdown code and raw buttons for creating such a new cell manually. So yeah, we just wanted to bring this up a first time, because there is already a draft pull request open by Carlos. Incidentally, this pull request also fixes some issues with race conditions about creating that new cell, which in the case of RTC can result very easily in notebooks having two empty cells when you open them. So yeah, that's it. If people have ideas or comments, please feel free to share them.
Quick question before, because you're going to answer me faster than Binder can load. Does this PR include the UX UI from the discussion and other issue?
No, I think we would like to maybe have something minimal in there, but try to decouple the two discussions, because we feel that the UX UI question will probably have more stakeholders and people giving opinions and making mockups, and will take more time to get merged, while an initial technical removal of that constraint will solve some of the issues we have in RTC. We can have a placeholder UI and then work together on the improved version of the UX. Yeah. Although, yeah, I think actually Gabriela may have posted some things on the issue. I just saw that. Yeah, Darian.
So is the idea that we unblock development, but for 4.0, there is a sort of sign off on the UX?
No, I think just meant in two different PRs. We would, yeah. No, we need to have a nice PR.
Yeah.
For a nice UX for 4.0, definitely.
That makes sense.
FYI, I think there's probably assumptions through the code that assume there's a cell. So for example, I think active cell is always assumed to point to a cell in the notebook when you do the above or below keyboard shortcuts, etc. So this may have some subtle ramifications throughout the code base and interface changing changes.
No, active cell I think is you have to always check it can be null.
Okay, and
no, Jason is right. So the active cell can be null, but all over the place we assume it's not null. It can be null only because of the initialization, because at the beginning when loading the document we don't have a model yet. It's added later, but yeah, everywhere in the code we assume is not null. I did change that already on my PR. It could be other cases that I didn't see. But yeah.
Good. I'm glad it's on your awareness.
Yeah.
But the point here, well, okay. So if it's just assumption, that's great. If it's actually changing the interface in an incompatible way, then we want to make sure it's on a 4.0 boundary, major version boundary.
Do we know ways we could test those things? Like, are there UX tests to make sure that that's not getting overlooked somewhere that require? I ask that really weird. Do you know what I mean though?
Yeah, there is actually a lot of tests. The reason it's still on a draft PR is because there is a lot of tests that check specifically for not having an empty notebook. So yeah, that's why I want to add at least a button on this PR so I can change the test to check that there is a button instead of at least one cell. And yeah.
Go ahead, William.
I don't like this PR for what it's worth, for two reasons. One is it seems like your motivation is that why don't you just have the cell get created on the back end? And I guess the answer is because you still haven't done some stuff that needs to be done on the back end, but that's not a really good motivation to change the whole user interface. It's just a motivation to fix the back end. And then the other thing is there's all kinds of really nice user interface stuff, like creating a new cell by clicking on a toolbar with an existing cell. And if you don't have any cells, then that goes away. So like a user will be like, the way I know to make a new cell is to click here. And then they accidentally delete all their cells. And now suddenly they're like, I have no idea how to make a new cell. Obviously there's like a menu item at the top, but it's still, for a new user, it can be a frustrating experience if they have to know two different ways to do something.
So specifically for the UX, we mentioned the idea of having something at the bottom of the notebook, which will be at the top when you have an empty notebook, with a plus button for a new cell. So this would be right in the middle.
Still two different ways. No, there's three ways to make a new cell instead of. I don't know. That's just
so the other issue is that the NB format does not require to have cells. And so now just independently of RTC, you find yourself with an editor that always mutates a document when you open it. You can't just open it and look at it and not, change it, because it doesn't know how to have no cells. And to me, that's already something. And then overall, like these sorts of constraints actually don't play well with CRDTs for the reason that I explained, is that two changes that are valid can result through the automatic merging into a state that's invalid. And so in order for the constraints to be amenable to be represented by CRDTs, I think it's better to actually not have this mechanism to re-add the cell after the fact. But that's true. We could do it in the backend in UiPath, like remove entirely the logic and keep Carlos's PR, and maybe only keep the logic in Jupyter White Docs so that there is only one CRDT peer that is responsible for re-adding the cell. Michel raised his hand.
There'd be a special kind of a request when the last cell is deleted, when the frontend requests to delete the last cell, that it doesn't get technically deleted ever, but it's just cleaned. So that's my first question. And my other note is that if JupyterLab 4 is going to be a base for Notebook 7, that would be a substantial change for some of the users. And would there be a way to restore the previous behavior of having a cell always present? And while I understand that it might not be a problem for the majority of users, some users might have this current experience as part of their workflow, or some extensions might assume that there is a cell and that wouldn't be shown up in this PR. So I'm just saying that there is quite a lot of things which might go wrong with this change, and we need to be really sure that it's worth it. And right now, I'm just not convinced.
So
And finally, sorry, just last one point, that adding, I understand that this removes some of the code special cases that are in the code, but it adds a new UI which we need to test and ensure accessibility for, etc. And maybe there needs to be free buttons to add a cell code and markdown cell, etc. So just let's make sure that it's worth it.
yeah, so before, so no, this pull request does not add a UI. It removes the constraints to have an empty cell, to have one cell. And so there is no means to know whether a cell removal removes the last cell, because you could have messages crossing from different peers actually editing together the same notebook. We're both editing the same notebook. I delete cell 1, you delete cell 2. Messages cross, and we both are, end up with an empty notebook. And so, and it's actually something that does happen. So mostly around initialization and whatnot. So basically, we don't want to have all of these logics everywhere, re-adding cells and checking whether you were removing the last or whatnot. So that's actually removing a lot of special casing. The new UI is something that has been proposed independently of this question, which was to add buttons at the bottom to create new cells, and it does exist in VS Code. So for example, I'm going to share my screen. No, that's not the one. So something like this, where we would basically have these three buttons at the bottom: code, markdown, raw. That's the easiest sort of experience you could have. And in the Figma mockup, you can actually just hit enter, and if the focus is on code, you get like an empty code cell. So no click is required.
To kind of recap what I think I'm hearing. So if we are splitting these discussions in two, it seems like though there is still discussion that needs to happen with the fix on, right, even separate from the UI. Okay. Any other thoughts there? I'm assuming this is moving to the PR, or I don't want to cut this off, so we have time.
I guess my one quick other thought is what text editors do. Like if you open a file that's completely blank, it makes it look like there's a single blank line. Like if you open something in Vim or CodeMirror, but there actually isn't a line there. And when you start typing it, it puts the line there. So you could still have it where it looks like there's a cell, but nothing actually happens unless the user starts editing. Like there isn't really a cell there unless the user starts editing.
Yeah, we have a mockup for that, like a cell widget, but no cell in the
Yeah.
in the model. And when you start editing, it creates the cell.
That would be the closest to existing text editors.
That's the only solution that I could think of by keeping the cell. Basically, a standalone cell that we add to the UI, but is not in the model. And once we receive a source changed signal, then we add it to the model. There was another suggestion from Mike, I think, cleaning the last cell. I don't think it's a good idea because of what Sylvain just said. Maybe two users delete. There is only two cells on the notebook. Each user deletes one cell. We will end up with two empty cells in the notebook. But also, I don't think it's a good idea because I believe we could end up in a situation where one user cleans the cell, deletes all the cells, and so we clean the last one instead of removing it. and another user is editing that cell. For example, changing it from a code cell to a markdown. We could end up maybe in a situation where we have a code cell with the metadata of a markdown cell. I need to double check that, but I think it's possible. So I don't think it's a good idea to print the last cell either. So yeah.
Okay, so that was it. I like the Zen of Python, remove special cases. Yeah, thanks for suggestions. I think there will be more discussions about this. For sure.
Yeah, it sounds like it. This is interesting. Definitely got me thinking about stuff. I am checking the agenda one more time. I don't see anything new that's been added to the agenda or additional discussion. So I'm going to be quiet for a few seconds and let you all decide, but then I'll stop recording and we can have a non-recorded discussion if needed. Going once, going twice. Okay. Thank you all. That was a lot of good updates and interesting discussion that I'm going to be thinking a lot about. So thank you. And for anyone watching in the future, have a good rest of your day.